Hello, everyone. I hope you all are here. So, in our last class yesterday, we talked about Jacobean drama, right? And we had some certain code to remember all Jacobean drama, right? And if you remember any of the code, you can just write down in the chat box. We had code like Benjamin, remember? And we have other codes like hey, kind woman, why would you? Remember that? Would you cheat and the plot? You can put this to remember, right? So, hey, kind woman, and why would you cheat on your husband? Your husband, Frank, remember, to a guest. What was the name? Remember? With when. So that was our code for Jacobian. This is for Haywood. This is for all together. Wrote one work, right? East word ho. And there it was this code. All of these are written. Ben Johnson, we have George Chapman, and we have Marston also. So through that code. Other code, as you remember, we have please deck, remember, your shoes in an tire. Remember that code also we made. Then we have Webster, Web, White, Malfi. We know all the codes and also the plot itself. So kind of everything we have studied in drama. We have also discussed questions. They didn't ask much questions based on that, but they include all these things in match the following. So in that way, they easily cover all the Jacobian. So you get at least two questions every time on this particular page, mostly about Webster and Middleton. We have Beaumont and all these things. Anyway, if it's clear to you, you can write clear in the chat box. So we'll move forward to our prose. And today we're going to discuss about Bacon. As you know, we have, uh, almost two questions every single time they ask on Francis Bacon. Very important that you should pay attention, and whatever I say and whatever is there in bold mark, these kind of questions appeared already in your exam. So, in that perspective, this particular session will be very fruitful for you, and it will definitely help you in exam and will help you to grab at least two to three questions easily. And we have also collected all the questions what they have asked in your exam, and there we will discuss somewhere around 14 to 15 questions till like from the past 6 years. And seventh years means you're going to get soon one more book on cracking NTA. Remember that series, cracking English? We have the PYQ kind of book that helps a lot, and it was a kind of bestseller for us. And if you only read those books, you don't have to read anything else, and everything is clear for you, right? But we are moving as a period, right? As all the period together, I mean, in a series wise. So all the doubts you have will be clear through these lectures. So let's not waste any more time and jump straight into Bacon. So, how many if you have read Bacon's essay? If you have read, write, read already, right? Already read, you can write read. Okay. And if you any have read, you can just type the name also there. And remember, they have stopped asking from office studies questions. They basically asking from where to New Atlantic. Very important, and also advancement. So these two work is very important. Another is the Latin work, that Nuam, that one also. So they ask questions from that these days. But if you know the essay, then it's good for you, but you should know all these other works. He also talked about poetry in one of his work. And can you guess where did he talk about poetry? You can write in the chat box, or if you just wait, you'll know where he talked about. He talked about three kinds of poetry. Sydney also talked about three kinds of poetry. Right, Plato said what? That poetry is mother of lies, and it should be banned from the ideal state. And he got reply from Sydney, and Sydney also replied who? Gushon, very important. And what happened next is that Sydney's reply were also for our Shelley. Remember, he replied to Sydney and Plato and whoever it was at that time, right? He also talked about two kinds of poetry, Shelley, that we'll discuss in that period. So, in that way, you can just divide all these things, right? As you know that uh, Bacon, that was kind of new thing, no, for you. That Bacon also talked about types of poetry in his work. So let's move quickly. Just excuse me. Little bit noise here, but it'll anyway go away. So we quickly talk about little bit about his life. As you know, he born in London, and he was the keeper of the Great Seal. They used to ask these kind of question in that A, B, C, D statement. But these days they're not asking about his life, but they are asking about work, which is kind of new for you all, right? So he studied in Cambridge and entered Gray's in 1576. And Bacon, introduced this new. Just excuse me, my parcel is coming. I'll be back in a minute. Sorry, guys, I was just checking out who was knocking at the door. Anyway, so we are here. We were talking about his new form of style, which was what that kind of scientific, inductive, all these stuff, right? So that we'll talk about anyway in his. He parliament member in 1584. And why he's famous? Because of the he flourished under the Jacobean period, or James the first accession, right? So he also kind of knight, and he was awarded knighthood in 1603. So as you can see, he had kind of so many feathers in his hat, right? So he was not a kind of ordinary guy. He was very well respected at that time, and he had so many achievements, right? And Bacon enforced King James divine right theory, very important, and became popular with the House of Commons again. Another feather added to his era hat. Anyway, appointed Lord Chancellor. They used to ask these questions past, like I'm talking about past 10 years. Right now, they have, as I told you, stopped asking all this. But you should know that Bacon was not an ordinary guy. He was a great man with great achievement and a lot of things that influenced him, right? So Bacon confessed because he was also imprisoned and he was exiled from the court and office. So when man reaches to the height, there are chances that he'll fall down. So that period was for Bacon also. Anyway, as I told you, his style, right? He mostly focused on literary and scientific pursuit. And as I told you, he was also known as the father of empiricism. That was all about his life. Now our main focus should be on his works. And as you can see over your screen, he was not writing in English but also in Latin. So kind of both language. He has written a lot of stuff in Latin, and in exam they ask from this part mostly, right? And as you know, in English he has written all these essays. So many essays are there, but I have just compiled important ones that they ask. So let's move. uh, his first essay, as you know, it was number 10 only in the first appearance, which was 15 and only 10 essays. Right. Then the number grew to 38, essays in 1612 edition and 58 to 1625 edition. So you can just 10, 38 and then 52. These numbers are important that you should know in all these addition. Anyway, so this one is very important. As you can see over your screen, the advancement of learning 1605. Important is the date and important whatever the content is inside. Anyway, I'll talk about it, you know, in just quick. So we have another work that is Opothekems. I don't know how to say this Latin work, but what is important for you, the New Atlantis. Actually, he left unfinished because of his death, and a philosophical romance based on utopia. So there was a connection in utopia, same kind of what he has also a state called Bensalem. Very important, and they have asked question on that as well. So anyway, his work another is Instatio Magna, vast scheme which he called actually this particular name in Latin. So if you get in exam, some of his work in A, B, C, D statement, and suppose one or two is in Latin written, another are English, some other work also, not by him but others, then you should know that Latin work is by our Bacon, so you can select those points. And also if you know his other English work, like the advancement of learning, the New Atlantic, you can also select that. So in that way you can just figure out what he has written. But anyway, philosophical work that I want to talk about, he has written the two books of Francis Bacon, of the proficiency and remember the advancement of learning, divine and human. That is the full title, but in exam they ask advancement of learning, right? Remember the style, that is text. Talked about it, started this our uh, uh, Roger Asham, right? That is also important. Anyway, you can just see here what I have just extracted a kind of phrase here, and he talked about tennis in this particular work. So very important that there was a question based on that long ago, not right now, but they have asked about that game. And there is some description what this tennis game makes you, like you'll gain quick eyes, good body to ready to put itself in all positions, and mathematical the use of which is collateral and all these other stuff. Another work, insta ratio magna, also known as what this, they ask question on that. What they ask usually, who has written this particular work. If, as you know, it's Latin, if Bacon is there, then you can just select our Bacon option, right? So part 2 in this novum organum is what? Part 2, very important, the great instauration. There is second part which this is called. Remember, this title was taken from Aristotle work with the same era, Arganon, right? And this is now known as Baconian method. So there, Baconian method means inductive reasoning, right? Inductive is what? So as you know, we just observe some pattern and then we reach to a conclusion, that is your inductive, right? But in deductive, what happens? There is a statement and then we observe all this, right? So this is your induct, this is your deduct, I guess, right? So we'll talk about these things later anyway. And then historio naturalis and access experimental, anyway this Latin you can just remember. What you have to know, that he has written this one as well. Very important, from that you get question like always. This time also you'll get from the past 6 year continuously they're asking on New Atlantis. So in that perspective, this particular work is like must, you should know about this thing. Nah? It is that must work that you have to keep in your mind. And also the date, they ask the date also, 1626. So 1623, you know, Shakespeare portfolio. Next, after 3 years, 1626, we have Bacon. Very important that you should know these dates. All right. And why it is important? Because of this thing, Bensalem, and the plan and organization of his ideal college. Remember, Solomon's house. These you have to know. The other, as you know, we have 97 first, then we have 1912, again 10, then 58 in 25. Right, this is this one. So all these things you have to remember. I have some extract from the essays that you all must be aware of studies in everyone's syllabus. This is there. So there are some quotes like crafty man, what contempt studies, simple men admire them, wise men use them. So tell me, what kind of man are you? So are you like simple or wise? Simple means they just only admire them, and wise is use them. So tell me, which one are you? Anyway, write in the chat box if you're there and if you're listening. Anyway, this extract, you know, is from of studies, and you have already kind of read this essay, I suppose. But anyway, let me tell you other important from the same uh, essays. Studies serves for delight, for ornament, and for ability. So this particular quote is also important. Another one is in the same essay, as you can see over your screen. We have quoted line like, to spend too much time in a study, if you study too much, is what? Sloth. If you use them too much, it's an ornament for you, right? And then to make judgment wholly by their rule is the humor of a scholar. So that you have to know. Then again, crafty man, same, the first one that we have the excerpt, same one. And then read, not to be, not to contradict and to confute, not to believe and take for granted, not to find talk and discourse, but to weigh, consider. Very important that you always kind of post a status with this particular uh, quote, most of you in your stories and all, right? Some book are to be tasted, others to be swallowed, and some few to be chewed and digested. That is some books. And again, some books are to be read only, others to be read but not curiously, and some few to be read wholly. And tell me, which work have you read half, then you just kind of uh, like skipping kind of reading some parts, or you have read wholly. Tell me any of work that you have uh, kind of read. Anyway, again, that you can see, read a full man, conference a ready man, and writing is exact man. What kind of category are you in? Can you just write in the chat box? Anyway, again, another quote is, history makes men wise, poets witty, and mathematic subtle. Right, so are you from that history person? Of course, we are talking about literature, so we are kind of wise men, right? Poets witty, if you write poetry, then you can say a lot of thing in just few words. Like you're a wit, your wit is good. So the mathematical studies, what if you're a kind of satire? So these things are very important, that if you know natural philosophy deep, moral grave, logic, rhetoric, all these stuff. Again, he also talked about bowling is a good for stone and rain, shooting for lungs and breast, gentle walking for his stomach, riding for the head, and the like. Other quote, so if a man's wit be wondering, let him study the mathematics. So again, the discussion on particular subject here. Famous essays are, as you know, we have 52, right? I think 58. How much? Can you write in the chat box? What was the number? Let me see. That was here. 58. So we have 58 essays, and from that I have selected which is important. You know about Of Truth, Revenge, you must have heard about it, Adversity. They have asked question on this, just like who wrote this particular essay, and they recently asked on Ambition. This they have asked very recent, and everybody is aware of this, of a study, right? Anyway, let's move forward. We have another one guy who's Nicholas Britton, and he is known for the passionate effort. That's all you have to remember. Now let's quickly move to the Jacobean prose question, especially on Bacon. So first we'll talk about Bacon's question, then we'll talk about other prose writers. Right. So let me tell you the first question. Again, I always tell it comes somewhere in the match the following. And what happens here in the match the following, you have to match from list 1 to list 2, and usually you get questions from Jacobean all in match the followings or chronology order. So that's the trend going on right now. So advancement of learning, very easy to you to track, is Francis Bacon. Past and present, we know, is by Carlyle, right? And English traits is by Emerson, and illness and metaphor is by Susan Sontag. Very important question that they ask question every time on Susan Sontag. Anyway, we'll talk about later when we reach into that particular period. Anyway, options are here, and our correct answer is this. Correct explanation, you just need to know that it was written by Francis Bacon, and date also 1605, after succession of James the First, right? 2 years. So through that you can just make connections. And past and present we know is by who? Thomas Carlyle. English trait is by Walter Emerson, and illness and metaphor is by Susan Center. These all explanation you'll get where in your course, and in that course all these videos will be available, all these explanations, all these notes, everything. If you haven't joined, you quickly join as soon as possible. But if you only want these notes, I mean, especially these questions and explanation, you can join our Udemy. We have recently launched it. Very easy to interact and very easy to solve all these questions with a good interface there, so that you can consider. And if you want to know more about it, you can just write in the chat box, I'll reply quickly, or write in the comment after the session, then I'll just check it out what you have inquired about. Anyway, question number 7 is on your screen. Just quickly, you have like 30 seconds to answer. Tell me, inspired the rise of periodical essays. So as we know, periodical essays, who at Jacobean time, and the rise in the beginning. So these addition and Samuel Pepys and all these came later, right? The first it was our English, and then that essay kind of style started my Michael de Montag. So that you have to remember. C and D, easy to track, easy to answer, not much of a confusion there, right? Question number 8, again as I always tell you, chronology you get questions. So advancement of learning, obviously Bacon, the first guy who has, you know the date, right? 1605, we just discussed, after 2 years, right? The origin of a species and the lives of the poet, by who? Johnson, right? So that is somewhere around 1781, if you remember the date. So somewhere there, right? So two, and then origin of a species somewhere around in 1800, and then on heroes and worship, very important, as you know it's by Carlyle, right? And Carlyle is somewhere around from 17 to between 18, so it could be uh, you know after advancement of learning. So as you can see here, the dates are here. So advancement of learning, very important date, we told you, easy to remember, 1771, that is our lives of poet. So 1781, I'll see what it is about, but this date is in my mind that I talked about. Anyway, so on heroes and hero worship, very important, 1841. Remember the date. And somewhere the origin of a species is 59, very famous date. So through that you can remember. Anyway, in advancement of learning, Francis Bacon divides poetry into 3 kinds. We talked about advancement of learning, these kinds of question you get. Plato also what banished. Sydney also talked about 3 kind of poetry, and here Bacon also talked about 3 kind of poetry. They are narrative, representative, elusive. So these order you have to know, and it was actually asked in the advancement of learning. So we have narrative poetry, representative poetry, elusive poetry. Other explanation on these particular types of poetry is there itself, you can get it in the notes. So question number 10 is in your screen. We are again matching the following from list 1 to list 2. As you can see, we have ambition, right? Recent question it is on who? Francis Bacon. And next is what I believe, is everybody know? E.M. Foster. Then we have again the death of the moth is by Virginia Woolf. And we are left with the Tory Fox Hunter is by Tory. As you know, addition is from Tory time, right? So that way you can remember. Same thing, you can just read about more also in the explanation when you solve your PYQ in Udemy also. Question number 11 about Francis Bacon. Again, they have again asked about the advancement of learning. So as you can see, we are getting a lot of questions from this particular work. Between two kinds of truth. So in that, he not only talked about, he has not only three, but he also truth, two kinds. So we have two questions from that total, right? So theological truth, obviously, and scientific, he actually belonged to that itself. That was his method. So through that you can just easily answer if you know Bacon better. Again, chronology order, as we know, our Francis Bacon, James time, remember. Then the second would be who? Is it John Dryden? Somewhere around 1700, right? So we have Dryden, and then we have our Richard Steele. Of course, these periodicals that they started, Steele, and then we have Matthew Arnold, our Victorian, right, and Charles Lamb before that here. It's what our romantic. So Lamb, and then we have Victorian R. Matthew Arnold. So if you know it, very easy to. Anyway, if you know just one, you can easily answer. If you know Bacon's date, you can easily select an answer. Question number 13, the advancement of India. Again, all the questions are coming from what dedicated to who? Of course, to the King James the First. Elizabeth was not there in the Jacobean. It stopped in 16th, early 16th century, 17th century, and what started King James 1603. So that you can easily answer. What is the correct chronological sequence of the following English non-fictional prose writer? So again, in that you see Bacon is obviously in the first, B is where in the one option you can easily less than 10 seconds answer. But to arrange this, as we know, we have first Bacon, then we have who is our addition. Remember that is spectator and all, the pleasure of text and all this stuff. Then we have what, C, Charles Lamb, romantic. Then we have what, Victorian, Arnold. And then we have modern is Wolf. Easy to track all these in chronological order, right? Not much of an effort that you have to do, and even if you know one of them, you'll be easily to answer. Again, recent question on Novum Organum. So it was written by Bacon. Right, 16, Francis Bacon explained the new logic of inductive method. So where he actually explained about the, he talked about in here. So kind of two questions from his Latin work. Right. Okay, that is also known as Baconian method. Very important. Then question number 17, it's about these assertion and reason. As we know, Montague established the term essay absolutely true, and Bacon followed it, right? And he was what? The father of English. So answer, right? So both are true, but because if you add that assertion and reason, there is no kind of connection between that, you can just select this. So, while both statements are true, Montague established the essay as a literary form, and Bacon is considered the father, but they do not directly connect each other. If they have added something like that because of Montague, he got inspired, then there is a connection. But there was no connection at all in this statement, assertion and reason, right? We have important work by Burton, as you know, the anatomy of melancholy. They used to ask a lot of questions on anatomy of melancholy but they have kind of stopped it. They just ask who has written this work. But before it was not that. They were asking a lot of questions, and for that you have to remember for this character, Democritus. Very important. If they ask some deep, they'll ask that, and they might ask full title also. In full title, we have kinds, the causes of melancholy, the symptom of melancholy, prognostics, and several cures of it. And we have three main partition in the essay. So everything is already there in the full title itself. That is actually these are three main like sections, members, and subsections. So, melancholy is either indisposition or inherent, that Burton defined the subject. Melancholy comes upon every small occasion of sorrow. That's absolutely true. Right? Need, sickness, trouble, and fear and grief. Causes heaviness and vexation of spirit. No man living is free. All these important quotes from that can actually represent the whole plot, and everything what he has discussed in melancholy we have actually discussed through the quote, the whole particular work. Melancholy is the mortality. Burton describes what melancholy as serious ailment. It develops into a habit. If you are more kind of melancholy every time, then you find pleasure in that pain and melancholy, and that is pleasant and painful. And Burton drew from psychology. So the best example of this you can just put Keats, right? Always kind of pessimistic poems, but very strong and very effective. So Burton drew from psychology, physiology, and astronomy. Beginning of Hippocrates, Aristotle, and Galen. Latin poetry and ancient references is there. Nearly 900 pages are there, divided into three sections: cause and symptom, cure and melancholy of lovers. As I told you, remember this particular name. Okay, that is all about Burton's The Anatomy of Melancholy. Then we have Joseph Hall. What you have to know that he has written 6 books of The Harvest of Blows, and that's all you have to remember. In Overbury, they have asked question uh, long way back, but not right now. What you have to remember, a wife. You should remember that along with Bacon, we have other prose writer in Jacobean, and you just the name. That's all. First, very important, your Caroline of era that we'll talk about in our next session. So we have all these. He has written this autobiography of Charles the First. There are a kind of lot of stuff he has written there, and very good language also that you should know. Anyway, when we talk about Caroline era, we'll also talk about this particular biography by Charles the First. Raja Rasham, very important that I told you about, right? That style talks of all his kind of a style. Remember that. And he was a tutor to who Elizabeth and Queen Mary. He has written the schoolmaster. Most of the time they ask question in again match the following about the schoolmaster. Toxophilus very important because of the speech and also the style of writing. So writing this English matter in the English speech and English men. We have all on John. So already we have discussed in Elizabethan poetry, right? And he has also appeared some of the essays he has written in his Jacobean time, some of the prose. As we know, we have a very good quote to remember all of this. Lil Anifer, Indian Saga of Moon. It covers all these things. Lil means lily, Anifer means what? Our Jennifer, Anifer. And then we have Sappho, Indian Saga. So these Indian Saga of Moon. So women in Moon, Indian we have Endymion, Right, saga is that particular work. So through that you can just if you remember this code, then question on Lily you'll just easily answer. Very important, Richard Hooker. There was a question on him, very recent, about the laws of ecclesiastical polity. Very important. They have asked question on, especially what that directly question. They don't usually ask direct question, but here they have asked about it, and the answer is R. Richard Hooker. Right, Hooker. So, Michael Drayton, we already talked about all these before in our Elizabethan poetry in the beginning. We have already, you can just go back and check the session. What didn't we talk about in this is about other poet that comes like we didn't talk about Davis, Emilia Lanier, Elizabeth Carey, and Lady Mary Ward. That will talk about these three great Jacobean or Elizabethan who women writer. So let me tell you the questions they have asked about John Daniel, as we know, Defense of Rhyme, Horace Arc Poetica, John Dryden, Dramatic Poesy, Ben Jonson, Timber. We always talk about timber means about the language and the word chosen, all these. ठीक? So that we have already discussed previously in our session. If you have attended, it will be easy to answer all these questions. Anyway, some of the other chronological word that we have made is Plato's Republic first, Aristotle Poetics, Horace Arc Poetica, then we have Longinus on the Sublime, then Stephen Gasson's School of Abuse, then the reply of Philip Sidney, then Thomas Campion, Observation Art of Poesy, then there is a reply of this is in the Defense of Rhyme, and then we have Dramatic Poesy by Dryden. Then we have who? Other like the essay on criticism by Pope, and then we have uh, Defense of Poesy again by Shelley, right? So that's all you have to know. So Sir John Davis, remember the date, and also not remember the date, just you should know there are other poet in this time, and one of them was John Davis. Very important work is Nosk Tepismo, or just simple Know Yourself. You just should have an idea that there were a poet and he has written this particular poem. So Amelia Lanier, very important, just to have that there was some, also as in the poetry. So we have three women: Emilia, Elizabeth, Lady. So these three you have to remember together. Anyway, Amelia Lanier is the first woman in poet. Elizabeth Carey, first woman in play. And Lady Mary Worth, English writer, you can just put it like a poet. Then we have prose. Easy to remember. Elizabeth Carey, work The Tragedy of Mariam. Very important. Sometime they have asked, but for the past 6 years, last 6 years, they are not asking on any of these. Okay, so that's all today for we have covered today prose and poetry, and tomorrow very important session will be starting Caroline era our Charles the first. We will talk about cavalier poet, we talk about metaphysical poet, and all these things together in a simple way with the code and all the questions that have appeared in the past 7 to 8 years. Everything is coming to you tomorrow, so be ready, and of course don't forget to subscribe the channel. First subscribe, I always tell you, always like and leave a comment always if you want me to put more content, or so that all will support us. Anyway, these are now free sessions going on for some time, and We are posting only video in between. So all the lectures, if you want in the series, you can just join the course or join our Udemy. If you want just notes and PYQs, then you can easily join our Udemy course with a very decent price, not like 5 to 10,000, but less than 1,000 rupees. You will get all these notes. Actually, these notes in printed it is cost 5,000 rupees, but with the offer you are getting printed material 2,500 for all 6 volumes, and that's a lot. And if you want this only the stuff, you can get it in 999. And if you want to solve everything online with the explanation, you can get it for 999. And if you want to join the course, that is 499 for all the live classes and all the notes, and of course all these PYQs, uh, MCQs, PYQs, all these in session. So thank you so much, and tomorrow start our you, and we'll have a quote something like that to remember. Loyal cavalier. So cavalier means what? They were loyal to the kings. So loyal cavaliers care well to these sick lovers, which means cavalier's definition is already there. We have, you know, Caryud, then we have what? Veiler, then we have Suckling, and then we have Lovelace. So all these kinds of pretty code is there to remember everything. So I hope you found this session very useful, and I'll see you tomorrow. So for now, bye bye and take care.